In the opening scene, we see a pregnant woman being urgently rushed to the hospital to give birth in a torrential downpour. Subsequently, the doctor tells her husband, Greg, that she dies during childbirth. He also reveals that their child has albinism, a genetic disorder that causes a lack of pigmentation. Greg is then taken to see the child, who is undergoing a brainwave test. Unfortunately, when he sees the pale baby, he is grief-stricken and he rejects the child as his own. Hello everyone. Today I will show you a mystery fantasy movie from 1995 called Powder. Spoiler ahead. The story cuts to 20 years later. Sheriff Doug and his team are investigating a recent case where an old man has died in a farmhouse. They determine that the old man died of a heart attack. In the process of searching the house, they accidentally discover a basement, where they find a hidden boy. Despite their efforts to coax him out, he refuses. Doug suspects that he's frightened, so he turns to a child services psychologist named Jessie Caldwell for help. She soon arrives in the basement and finds the boy hiding in a dark corner. Encouraged by Jessie, the boy eventually steps into the sunlight, revealing his pale skin. His real name is Jeremy Reed, but because of his bright skin tone, people have nicknamed him Powder. It's revealed that Powder has never left the house. After a while, Jessie asks Powder why he didn't contact the police when his grandfather died. The poor boy explains that his grandfather had warned him that if anyone saw him, they would take him away. Therefore, he always stays away from others. To educate himself, he has built a small library and has memorized all the books inside. Powder claims that he can recite every paragraph of every book he owns. Hearing this, Jessie selects a challenging book, usually meant for college students, and asks him to recite a specific page. To Jessie's surprise, Powder recites the first paragraph of that page flawlessly. Later, Powder accompanies Jessie out of the basement and she takes him to a boys' dormitory, as he is now in the care of the state. Upon their arrival, the other boys are captivated by Powder's appearance, as they've never seen anyone like him before. That evening, as Powder is having dinner in the dormitory, a group of bullies approaches him. Leading them is John, who asks Powder to wear a spoon on his nose. Surprisingly, Powder snatches the spoon from John's hand and begins to manipulate it. He makes the spoon stand upright on the table and effortlessly draws the other spoons towards it. This astonishes all the boys, making them think that Powder is a freak. On the other hand, after work, Doug arrives home to find his son Steve at the door. The two pass by each other without saying a word, clearly reflecting a strained relationship. Steve appears to be visiting his gravely ill mother Emma, who is bedridden with cancer. A caregiver tells Doug that seeing their son provides Emma with a healing feeling far beyond what pain medication can offer. Days later, Powder enters a high school and attends a physics class. In the classroom, Professor Ripley demonstrates a device called a Jacob's ladder, which produces an electrical current. As the machine starts, Powder becomes uneasy and starts to tremble. Suddenly, the machine overloads and discharges a powerful bolt of electricity directly into Powder's chest. This causes him to levitate in the air, frightening all the students in the class. Donnelly frantically tries to turn off the machine, but to no avail. He finally smashes the machine with a chair, putting an end to the chaos. Afterwards, all the students rush out of the classroom while Powder lies unconscious on the floor. Donald, fearing he has died, approaches and touches his body. Unexpectedly, the professor experiences a strange sensation and the hairs on his arms stand up, entering a changed state. In the following scene, Powder is hurriedly taken to the hospital, and Donald describes the incident to the doctor. However, the doctor doesn't believe it, as such a powerful electric shock would typically kill the boy, or at least leave some burn marks. Donald tries to convince the doctor, explaining that Powder's body continually undergoes a process called electrolysis, which is why he has no body hair. As the two continue to discuss, a nurse interrupts them and reveals that Powder has escaped from the hospital. Apparently, he fled by jumping out the window when no one was around. Meanwhile, Powder encounters his classmate Lindsay as he's walking down the street. They engage in brief conversation, while a curious neighbor observes them. Powder looks back at the neighbor and tells Lindsay that he can hear their inner thoughts. However, she thinks he is merely hallucinating due to the electric shock. Afterward, Powder continues to head back to his grandparents' home. However, he's eventually caught by Doug and his colleague, Duncan. Doug and Duncan ask him to get in the car. Upon returning to school, Powder is taken to a conference room to discuss his extraordinary intelligence. The principal personally visits him and reveals the results of his IQ test. It turns out that Powder's IQ is over 300, far surpassing the world's smartest people. The principal announces that he is a unique and extraordinary individual. However, Powder shows no interest in these matters and only asks to go home. Unfortunately, Jessie tells him that he can't go home anymore because the house now belongs to the bank. In the following scene, the high school students, accompanied by Doug and Duncan, embark on a forest camping trip. That night, as the students gather around a campfire, Powder sits alone. Seeing this, Doug approaches him, and the two begin to talk. Meanwhile, a thunderstorm rages and Powder says he can feel a storm inside himself. He expresses that when he sees lightning, he feels a magnetic pull towards it. Powder recalls his grandmother telling him that it's the power of God, though he doesn't believe it. He also reveals that his mother was struck by lightning while pregnant with him, which seems to be the reason for his unique condition. The next morning, as Powder is wandering in the woods, he is approached by the bullies, John and Mitch. Without any reason, John points his gun at Powder, saying that he can kill him right away. However, before he can pull the trigger, a gunshot is heard in the distance, diverting everyone's attention. They rush in the direction and discover that Duncan has shot a deer. Powder is deeply affected by the sight, as he can empathetically sense the pain and fear of the dying deer. When he cannot take it anymore, he grabs Duncan's wrist with one of his hands while placing the other on the deer's neck. Surprisingly, Powder transfers the deer's sensations of pain and fear to Duncan, causing the latter to convulse violently. As the effect intensifies, John aims his gun at Powder, demanding that he release the officer. However, our protagonist simply stares him in the eye and continues torturing Duncan. Enraged, John pulls the trigger, but Mitch intervenes in the nick of time, raising the gun and ultimately saving Powder's life. In the aftermath of these events, Powder is brought back to Jessie, who questions him about what transpired. She is genuinely worried about his well-being and state of mind. However, Powder ignores all her questions and states that he wants to return home. When she keeps on insisting, he becomes angry and unintentionally unleashes his powers, causing glasses as well as the lights to shatter. He then walks away, confidently stating that Jessie won't be able to keep him there for long. Meanwhile, Doug returns home and meets with the family doctor, who updates him on his wife's worsening condition and the immense pain she is enduring. Although Doug doesn't comprehend why she chooses to hold on, he believes there must be a reason. The doctor informs him that he will never know the reason because Doug's wife is completely unable to communicate. The next day, Powder is sitting alone in the dining room when Donald approaches him. The professor reveals that he felt a distinct energy within himself when he touched Powder during the earlier incident in class. He describes the energy as immensely powerful, making him feel youthful again. He also talks about Einstein's theory, which states that if a person uses 100% of their brain, they can do unimaginable things. Perhaps Powder is able to do just that, which explains his incredible powers. Donald then expresses his desire to be friends with Powder so that he can gain more information from him. The scared boy is a bit hesitant at first, but he eventually agrees. On the other hand, Doug visits Duncan's place and notices that he has removed all firearms from his home despite being a diehard fan of hunting. When asked about the reason, Duncan becomes emotional and shares his experience. When Powder transferred the deer's pain to him, he felt the deer's agony. He describes it as an excruciating sensation, as if he himself was on the brink of death. Duncan admits that the incident has traumatized him so much that he can no longer bear to hold a gun. Hearing this, Doug realizes that Powder possesses extraordinary abilities, giving him an idea. He decides to have the boy help him communicate with his terminally ill wife through telepathy. Later, Doug brings Powder to his home and introduces him to his ailing wife, Emma. Powder gently touches her forehead, enters her inner world, and conveys her thoughts to the sheriff. Through Powder's telepathy, Doug learns that his wife is still holding on to life because she doesn't want to pass away without wearing her wedding ring and without reconciling with their estranged son, Steve. She reminds Doug of a cherished memory from Steve's childhood when they were playing in the snow, and she lost her wedding ring. Hearing this, Doug recalls how Steve used to search in the snow every day after school, hoping to find his mother's wedding ring. Emma then reveals that Steve has found the ring, and it's been kept in a silver box on her bedside table. Doug is moved to tears by this news, and tenderly places the ring on his wife's finger. Then Powder touches Doug's wrist with his other hand, allowing him to hear his wife's voice. Doug is overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face, and he embraces his wife, assuring her that everything will be okay. In the final moments, she opens her eyes one last time, and then peacefully leaves this world. Soon, Steve arrives on the scene, and Doug immediately embraces him tightly. The two finally put aside their differences and reconcile after years apart, all thanks to Powder. The scene then shifts to a county fair, where Powder encounters Lindsay. She seems to be the only one who doesn't look at him differently. After chatting for a while, Powder suddenly touches Lindsay's hand, letting them hear each other's inner thoughts. During their exchange, Lindsay learns that Powder's father abandoned him because of his albinism. She feels saddened and comforts him, reassuring him that his face is the most beautiful in the world. Then, she suddenly kisses him, drawing the attention of those nearby. Unfortunately, Lindsay's father notices this behavior and confronts Powder, hurling hurtful insults at him. He even prepares to strike the poor boy, but luckily, Jessie, who is also at the fair, steps in to help. She apologizes on Powder's behalf and takes him away. Later, a heartbroken Powder returns to the inn, packs his bags, and plans to flee back to his farm. However, as he's leaving, he accidentally hears some boys playing basketball. Curious, he heads to the court, only to find John and his gang. Powder wants nothing to do with them, so he tries to leave, but Bully John blocks his way and steals his hat. Then he challenges Powder to retrieve his hat using his supernatural abilities. Our protagonist could easily do so, but he delves into John's inner world instead, revealing his painful past of being abused by his stepfather. It turns out that John's stepfather had taken away a hat that belonged to his late biological father, and ridiculed him in the same way he's ridiculing Powder now. Unfortunately, this only enrages John further, and he decides to take action. Suddenly, a heavy rain pours down, and John forcefully drags Powder outside. He strips the poor boy naked, pushes him into the mud, and lets his pale skin turn even more vivid, all to humiliate him. Unable to bear further humiliation, Powder unleashes a spherical, powerful electromagnetic pulse, sending all the bullies flying. A brief moment later, everyone calms down except for John. Mickey, worried, checks on him and finds his heart has stopped. In fact, he's on the brink of death. Realizing what he's done, Powder is immediately filled with regret, so he quickly acts, using his superpower to perform CPR on the bully. Fortunately, the CPR is successful, and John comes back to life. This impresses all the bullies, especially Mickey, so he decides to help Powder. He assists Powder in secretly getting onto a car headed to his grandfather's farm, allowing him to escape. Unfortunately, when Powder gets home, he finds that all his belongings have been seized by the bank. Soon, Jessie comes to find him, comforts him, and assures him that she'll find a better place where he will be accepted and understood, not like now. Donald joins them, and as they prepare to leave, they run into Doug and Duncan outside. Jessie asks Doug's support, pleading for him to let the boy go. Unexpectedly, Doug agrees since Powder helped him reconcile with his long-lost son. Just then, a thunderstorm hits, and Powder begins to run towards the fields, everyone following behind. Suddenly, a lightning bolt strikes him, ultimately engulfing him in a blinding flash. As the film ends, the clouds emit a final, thunderous roar, signifying that Powder has reached heaven. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like. It really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.